Hey, Nikki here, and in this video, I'm going to show you some different strength-based exercises that you can do to troubleshoot tight hip flexors. So before I show you these exercises, I think the context of why our hip flexors might feel tight is really helpful. A lot of the time, we might have heard or been told that if our hip flexors feel tight, then it's because they are overly strong and we need to actually stretch them. And here's the deal, there's nothing wrong with stretching. If it calms things down or feels good, I have no problem with it. But a lot of the time, actually, when our hip flexors feel tight, it's because they are weak, especially relative to the demands of the exercises that we're doing. And this can show up in all sorts of places. So for example, if you've ever done like the Pilates exercise where you lie on your back and you extend one leg and you pull it in, you switch sides, and your hip flexors are like burning up, someone might have told you like, oh, that's because they're too tight. You should really use your core. But hint, hint, that is a hip flexor endurance exercise, holding them up. And so interestingly, if you strength train and your hip flexors get stronger, you'll probably find that you feel less burning when you're doing that kind of exercise because they don't feel like they have to work as hard to do the same amount of effort to hold your legs up. Your legs will quite literally feel lighter. It's kind of the same thing if you really feel your hip flexors when you're doing a lot of hiking or exercising. A lot of the time, it's just they're tired. They're being used a lot in a way that you don't have necessarily the right amount of strength for relative to the demands of the activity. So a lot of the time, actually activating them and helping them get stronger may help with some of the discomfort or tightness that you are feeling. And of course, you can still stretch or foam roll if that feels good too. So there's a few different exercises here. I'm going to show you some kind of more loaded ones and less loaded ones. The first one is actually just hanging out in a somewhat loaded squat. So you'll probably want like a dumbbell or a kettlebell. You'll bring it up. You'll set up your feet in whatever your preferred squat stance is, and then you'll sit down to whatever your bottom range is. Now, I'm hypermobile. I can go really far. You might not be as low as me. Also, notice here, this is me hanging out. I'm not using any muscle to be here. Here, I have to use my muscles a little bit more, and you can just kind of pry around in your squat, whatever depth feels right for you, and then coming out of it. So that's the first one that can sometimes help as a primer for hip flexors. If you tend to also struggle with hip mobility in squats, this one is helpful. Actually, all of these exercises will also be helpful for hip mobility when you're doing things like squats. Next one you can do is hip flexor activation with a mini band. There's a lot of ways to do this. I'm going to show you two today. So first one is you can put it around your feet and then find a plank position either on the ground, or if that's not quite right for you, it feels a little too challenging, you can do this plank up on a bench. So you'll find your plank position, nice flat back, and then you'll pull the leg in, you'll hold, keeping hips square, bring it down, hold till you feel your core engage, bring it down. And again, I am actively training my hip flexors with my pelvis in a stable position, which interestingly will help with usually hip mobility and that feeling of tightness. Now, if the plank position doesn't work for you, you can do the same thing standing. So I'm going to do that. Same idea here. I would find a wall or something stable, maybe be on a slight lean, and then you're going to march, pulling the leg up, taking it down, pulling the leg up, taking it down, trying to hold your pelvis level as you do this. So that's the mini band version. You also can do this loaded with a kettlebell. Now, quick note, there is a little bit of trust if you're going to use the kettlebell for this one, and I would not use a heavy kettlebell because you also have to work your shin and ankle to be able to hold your leg up there. So this takes a lot of lower leg strength in addition to hip flexor strength. But what I would do is I would grab a fairly light kettlebell, and then you will hook your toe around it, find a place where you can hold on to something for balance, because the focus here is really being upright and stable. Your ribs are lined up over your hips, and then you're going to flex your foot and you are going to slowly lift the leg up, touch it down, reset as much as needed at the bottom, lifting it up, and touching down. So that is a series of different exercises that you can do to really isolate and work on that hip flexor control and strength, I would suggest doing that in conjunction with a well-rounded strength training program, because nothing can really replace just that global strength. If we don't have it, it is something worth working on. But hopefully that gives you some ideas and that helps. And if you are looking for some customizable strength workouts, I do have a week of free workouts available for you. You can get them via the link in the description.